Hello and welcome to Breakthroughs with Bree, where we are discussing all the topics that create extraordinary breakthroughs in our personal and spiritual development journeys. I'm Bree, otherwise known as Healing with Bree, and I'm a spiritual coach and Akashic Records channelers who helps sensitives and intuitives connect more deeply with their hearts, intuition, and souls, and teaches people how to process and alchemize the fears and beliefs that hold them back from living in their authenticity and purpose. You're in the right place if you like to hear about spirituality, psychology, healing, consciousness, manifestation, developing your spiritual and intuitive gifts, and living from your heart and soul instead of from your fears and ego. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Breakthroughs with Bree. I'm so excited about the topic today. It's been coming up a ton in my one-on-one work with my clients, which, by the way, I've had added some new ones through the opportunity of my 70% off scholarship. So if you didn't know, I do one-on-one coaching work. And if it felt like price was prohibitive to you before, I have a couple spots open to work with me for 70% off the price of the program. Check out the link in the description to see if that scholarship is still available to click. And if it is, that means that there's still spots. So check it out. It's been really cool to see the people that come in. But anyway, this topic from today is, why does it feel like too much? Why do we get overwhelmed? What is going on here? And how can we shift out of it? And let me tell you what, I am a master at overwhelm energy. Because that is probably my number one feeling when I get off balance is feeling overwhelmed. 100%. And this has been something that I've really had to learn how to understand, how to connect with, how to extract wisdom from, and then how to manage so that I don't keep getting pushed into this feeling of overwhelm, which then pushes me into stress responses, which for me is a freeze response. Then I'm locked up and then I'm not doing anything. And then I'm feeling more overwhelmed because things are piling up. You know how it goes. And what's also interesting too, is I find that the other side of the coin from overwhelm is this feeling that there's not enough support. Maybe it's friends who are not reciprocal, or money not coming in the way that you want it to, or feeling like you're not getting enough help or support from your partner. Usually this feeling of overwhelm goes hand in hand with this story or perception, and therefore experience a lack of support in your external world too. And I want to break this down today. So one of the very first things that I learned when I was deep diving into this experience, this pattern that I kept having of being overwhelmed, was that I was actually having unrealistic expectations for myself and my time, which there was a part of me that really rebelled against this, because I was ambitious and I wanted to do things, and there were things that I was excited about doing, and I technically was kind of watching other people do, and I'm what do you mean? Everybody else is doing this, I should be able to do this too. And it was kind of something that was hard for me to accept initially. But one of the first things I had to contemplate is that literally what I'm expecting from myself, particularly in the amount of time that I'm telling myself that I should happen, is already setting me up for failure. Okay. It's literally setting me up to kickstart into this domino effect, into this cycle of being overwhelmed, shutting down, and just the whole thing. The other element of this, and this is something that I've learned with a lot more depth recently, was I was underestimating the level of support that people get and that people need to be able to not only move through life, but particularly to move through stressors in life. And growth, by the way, is a stressor. It is a type of stressor. To move out of what is normal, aka safe to the brain, into new places and spaces, to push yourself, is a type of stress. So whether it's a stressor from an unfortunate event happening, or it's you trying to push into new places and new goals, these are stressors to the mind, to the body. And I was grossly, vastly underestimating the level of support that any human needed in order to move through stressors. And what happens when you do that is you don't get the level of connection or support or comfort that your body and a human needs to be able to process and move through feelings, emotions, things that come up, in order to keep moving towards action, moving towards solutions, moving towards the actual resources that address, whatever the situation was. Because I I didn't understand the role that comfort and support plays in moving through stressors. I was thinking that there was something wrong with me for being stressed out, for being overwhelmed, for being upset, and somehow not being able to move through those upset feelings on my own. Triggers a shame cycle. It would do like a whole thing, which again, then pushes me into a fear state, pushes me into overwhelm, and pushes me ultimately into a freeze response. And if you don't know the stuff about the freeze response, there's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. These are nervous system dysregulation states. And that's when our nervous system thinks that there is danger of some kind, or our subconscious mind has assessed that there is danger, there's something to be afraid of. And our physiology clicks into one of these states because it thinks it's giving us our best chance of survival. Okay. If you feel like you can fight, you get anxious, you're in fight mode. If it feels like flight and running away is going to give you the best chance of survival, then you're trying to get out of here, avoidant, run, right? If things are overwhelming and it doesn't feel like any of those options are going to give you the best chance, you freeze. It's like your body plays dead. It's like grr, 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 like powers down, right? And then like you couldn't get off the couch to save the world. Like you couldn't do it, right? And then fawning, they say essentially people pleasing, and it's between freeze and fight. It's suppressing your own needs and your own desires and acting on what you're perceiving from other people. So there is a little bit of action, which is why they kind of put it in the like fight or flight category, but there's also like a repression of your own self that's required in order to fawn. So that's how it gets in there. So anyway, the freeze response, survival mode response, that can be very difficult to come out of. So anyway, I was simultaneously over expecting things of myself, expectations, what I could do, things on my literal to-do list, and I was underestimating the amount of things that needed to come in, including support, including resources, including connection, in order to sort of like fuel the ship here to move forward and to actually get those things done. So then when things weren't working out and they were feeling stressful, when I wasn't accomplishing these literally unattainable expectations, then it would like reinforce some of these beliefs that I had that, oh, it's my fault, I'm not doing enough, I'm not capable, all of these self-doubt and self-shaming stories, which were also a result of some unresolved early life stuff. And again, it would drive me into a freeze response, a procrastination response, etc., etc. And I was not getting done the things I wanted to get done. I was not meeting goals I wanted to meet. My health was suffering. Like all of these things happened that I really had to reckon with, and that felt really difficult. Another thing that happens a lot and happened for me is I feel like that inner victim became really, really loud. If you follow Mystic Michaela, the victim blue, part of me I felt like came out a lot during those seasons. And I want to explain why, because this kind of transitions into what being overwhelmed signals to us, and therefore how we can respond to ourselves, how we can support ourselves, how we can elicit support we might need outside of ourselves in order to move through that feeling of overwhelm or a freeze. So the thing about the inner victim that I find is that it's a combination of overwhelm, which is circumstances that we feel like we can't influence, whether it's because there's too much of it and we don't have enough time and energy, or maybe the concepts feel too big for us to understand and therefore confidently navigate, or just something about it feels like bigger than us. Like I can't possibly like tackle that, right? So it's a combination of us feeling like we can't influence things that are going on in our lives, and us feeling like the support in order to get there is somehow like not available to us. And within that, we feel powerless to be able to move forward or to make it happen different, which then brings up some of those sort of victim mentality stuff of everything's happening to me, the universe is out to get me, everything bad always happens to me, like this is just my fate. It's sort of this mentality of the bad things that happen to me are inevitable and I can't do anything to change them. So just planting myself here, and here we go. Bad things go on and they happen, and I am powerless to change or to stop them. When I started doing work with my inner victim, I realized that she often needed two different things. One, she needed to be seen in her feelings of overwhelm and struggle. A lot of times, a victim part of ourselves is a way that we signal for help. A lot of times kids, when they acted like very sort of victim-y, that's when the adults around them finally paid attention enough to help them. That was the only way that they felt like they could get the support, was when they like really embodied a little bit of that victim energy. They use that as a strategy to get needs met, right? And we do that within our own self and our own psyche. When there's that kind of victim energy, there's a part of us that's trying to get seen, to get support. So when I started looking at it that way, I'd like literally sit down with myself. I love doing parts work where I imagine the part of myself in front of me and we're talking and I'm seeing them and it's like a whole thing, right? So I would sit down with the energy that was coming up that was maybe presenting with some victim energy, and I'd be like, okay, what's going on? How are you really feeling? And oftentimes what would come next is this feeling of I'm feeling scared and I'm feeling powerless. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't understand why this bad thing is happening. I don't feel confident, or I don't feel clear about what I can do to make it different. I don't feel like I can influence or have power over this. And that makes me feel really scared, really overwhelmed, and like hopeless a little bit. There was so much healing and there was so much catharsis. And even just having that moment, what I tell my clients all the time is you have to connect before you correct, right? Of course, there's some sort of adjustment that I want to make in my subconscious programming and my beliefs that's, triggering some of this victim energy, but it's not more important than connecting and understanding the energy in the first place, because that energy is literally living in me physically, and those emotions need to be metabolized and processed before correction can even happen anyway, right? So it was really valuable to be able to sit down and be like, oh, I understand why like my inner victim is feeling really loud right now. I understand what she feels fear about. I understand what she feels sad about. And I understand where there is confusion or lack of clarity or a lack of confidence in her ability to move forward and enact and influence change in her own circumstances. So of course she feels helpless, and of course she feels hopeless. Like, of course she does. This is when you have the opportunity to see where you need support and to elicit it. And that is also the role that understanding how much support a person actually needs and not underestimating it is really important, because a lot of the times the support that we need does come from outside of us through the form of information or people that can mentor us or support us, or other resources that help bridge the gap that we're feeling that can drive and perpetuate that helpless energy. So when I saw again and let myself metabolize some of these really heavy, sad feelings, that lightened the load in itself. And then it just becomes a question of, okay, how do I learn how to do that? Maybe I gotta go learn. Maybe I gotta go Google it. Maybe I gotta go ask in ChatGPT. Maybe I gotta find creators or coaches that teach about this that I resonate with. Maybe this reaffirms a feeling that I've been having about finding a coach or therapist that I can work with. Maybe I was just thinking about a friend who I know has gone through something like this the other day, and I can call and ask them what their experience was or their opinion, right? Like, there's a really important role that getting help and support to bridge the gap between what you feel like you know and you can do and what you don't know and you can do, in order to put us back in a place of empowerment and to help ease that stress that we feel in our own bodies, so that we actually feel regulated enough to find solutions and take actions forward. So that was a really big breakthrough in all of that, was being able to just objectively and honestly see where there was a gap between what I knew how to do and what I wanted to be able to do, and learning how to go out and seek support, not just in the form of advice and information, but also in comfort, also in connection, and just like emotional support from people, because that is also something that we seriously underestimate when we've not had caregivers who they themselves could provide a lot of attuned and healthy emotional support. Is we never really get to play that out. We never see its purpose. And a lot of times we underestimate, we undervalue how important it is in the process of moving through stressors. It's required for every human. It's not you asking for too much. It's literally how people who you see succeeding and have the privilege of being raised in secure attachment styles are able to move through their life with more ease, is because one, they're not blaming themselves and assuming they are the problem for why things have worked out poorly. I know, crazy that there's a whole group of people who don't immediately blame themselves or assume it's them when things go wrong. They exist, And that's why life feels a little easier for them. So one, they don't do that. And two, they elicit and are able to then get the level of support, even just emotionally, to move through stress, to process feelings that are coming up, and then are able to move through those and land in the place with a clear head to say, okay, what could I do now? Like, what are the solutions that are waiting for me? What's the next step? What's the best choice? And can like resource and move forward with whatever the stressor is. With more emotional capacity, because they did the emotional processing to create space and emotional capacity that it can be simply dedicated to the action and the solution moving through the problem, through the stressor. Both parts have to happen. It's not just the action and the strategy, but it is also the emotional processing, because that is one of the best and most important things that we take away from moving through stressful situations, is what we learn and have the opportunity to adjust and heal in ourselves when there's a stressor, like that emotional piece. So both have to be attended to in order to feel like we're moving through our stuff with ease and we're kind of like maximizing our experience through it all. So coming back to the overwhelm, that's something, the kind of like getting the support and where do I need help and all of that. And then the other part that has been really important to manage is the expectations that I set for myself. And realizing that I was just being really silly. Like all of that was unnecessary. I did a whole episode on setting goals from a soul perspective, and part of what I shared in there feeds into this. Is I'd kind of learned that creating really high expectations and shaming myself, I thought was how people motivated themselves. Like I thought that was the only strategy to get yourself to get up and do things and motivate yourself, which I found is not true. I found, in fact, when you remove a lot of the fear and the shame and you learn how to be motivated by desire and by joy and by inspiration, your experience like getting things done that you want and like the energy that you have for it is much greater. It's much more enjoyable. But I was setting these really high expectations for myself, and I was just criticizing and punishing myself when I wasn't meeting this too high of a mark. So there was a lot of self-compassion that had to get introduced into the equation, and there was a lot of like objectively checking in with stuff. Like there was a whole time period where I literally wrote out all of the things that in my mind I was expecting myself to do, and then I wrote like approximately how much time I thought that those would take, and literally compared that to the free hours I had in my day. And I'm not even kidding you, it was almost triple the amount of time that I actually had in a day. But like I had never like consciously connected those dots. Like all of these tasks that I'm thinking somehow I'm going to get done, like there's literally like of the free time I have, like they don't match. Like what? In addition, it was also again learning like I don't have to do all these things by myself. Like which ones of these things that might be important to me can I, work with my partner on, or can I ask other people to help me with if it's really important or it's something that maybe stresses me out a little bit, right? So it was being able to kind of like objectively assess the workload I was putting on myself, the expectations I was putting on myself, and realizing that I was engaging in a pattern of overloading my plate. And that was what was creating part of the suffering and part of the overwhelm and part of the anxiety that was kicking me into procrastination and free cycles. And if I didn't want to be overwhelmed, like chronically overwhelmed and chronically in that shame and procrastination cycle, I had to like at the start of that, stop overloading my plate with unrealistic expectations. That was a choice that I was making. So being able to like sit down and start like pulling that apart and looking at that more objectively, and then being able to prioritize saying, okay, well, based on, the time that I'm, maybe working my job, or I'm commuting, or, that I'm making meals for myself or my family, like how much other time is there? Realistically, I'm probably going to want to spend some of that watching a show or maybe scrolling on my phone. But like outside of that, how much like productive time do I have? And what is most important for me to do in that time? And maybe what I'm play around with is just like having this idea that I just do one or two of those things. Or maybe it's that I even build in like free time. That's something I taught all the people in my Flow Master program I did last year about like mastering the energy of flow. It's like, how do you expect Source to work with you or to bring in miracles or to bring in inspiration if like your schedule's so jam-packed that you've already decided how it's going to go by packing your schedule, that there's no room for inspiration to come or for like the universe to like intervene for you, So anyway, adjusting expectations on myself, having a lot more self-compassion, which is more realistic expectations. And those also took support, like learning how other people think about themselves in the ways that they do, working with coaches, working with therapists, where I could share what I was thinking. And again, these were people that I really respected. I trusted my intuition to bring me to them. I really respected their judgment and their wisdom. So when they would reflect back to me like, yeah, that's kind of like a crazy thing for you to think about. And I'm like, what? Like, everybody doesn't think this way, really? Like, it was an opportunity for me to take in and learn and adjust my own self-perception. And I realized there was a lot of self-perception that needed to change in order for me to access peace and ease, and for me to stop overloading my plate in such a way that drove me into those states of overwhelm. So that's a little sneak peek of some of like the inner work that I did to really help with this. And this, I would say, is a very big commonality in clients that I work with now, is people who are trying to dismantle that a little bit. So if you are interested in, you yourself finding that support to like bridge the gap and make those adjustments, I encourage you to check out my website for the ways that you can work with me, healingwithbrie.net. I have the one-on-one coaching available. I'm probably going to do a group program this year too, if you want to sign up for notifications about that. And I do single sessions, which aren't as much like coaching, but they're more like bringing through channeled messages and guidance, right? And my last little tips for you for just like in the moment when you know that you're overwhelmed. Number one is to acknowledge you're overwhelmed without shaming or judging yourself for being overwhelmed. You are having a very normal and fair reaction to the expectations or pressure that you are putting on yourself. And it is a signal that it's too much. It's a signal that it's too much. And that is accurate. It's not wrong. And it doesn't make you bad in any way. It is a communication device. Maybe you could say from your higher self to let you know, hey, there's too much. You got to take some off your plate now. You need a little bit more room in your energy and your field so that we can flow through you here, right? It's a signal. Okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Maybe what's underneath this, am I feeling afraid? Am I feeling a little bit of self-doubt? Am I feeling tense, right? Like, it's an opportunity for you to stop first and connect with some of those vulnerable feelings that are coming up in your body as a result of being overwhelmed by whatever's going on. And the second thing I will say is give yourself an opportunity to sit down and evaluate what you're expecting from yourself and make a plan to either take things off of your list, which you're almost always going to have to do, which might mean like cutting your to-do list in half, seriously, or breaking it down into smaller goals is another thing that people recommend, which I think can be good. Or if you need more emotional support. This is not some like kitty baby whiner, like, oh, you need emotional. No, like literally humans need emotional support when they're moving through stressors. So if it's that maybe it's not the number of tasks or the amount of time of the tasks, but you're just feeling so anxious in your relationship to that task, then that's a sign that you need emotional support. You need comfort. You might need a little guidance, right? And that is also a step to take to address whatever the core theme is about the overwhelm. Because any feeling that we have is always like a signal. It's a messenger that's trying to guide us back into our soul truth about the situation. And if you're relating to a certain task in such a way where there's feeling like there's a lot of pressure, then you're probably not connected to your soul truth. You're probably in some sort of ego pattern or sort of like ego perception of the situation. And that overwhelm can be a signal to dive a little deeper, to reprogram that sort of ego pattern belief into one that is reflecting your soul truth. And when things are reflecting our soul truth, we're feeling ease, we're feeling joy, we're feeling open, we're feeling curious, right? And if we're not feeling that way, there might be some other stuff going on, right? So those are my tips for you. Stop, connect with the feeling, don't judge yourself. Self-compassion. Assess what needs to be changed because you're justified in feeling overwhelmed. Is it taking things off the list? Is it prioritizing, taking the pressure off on that? Or is it getting comfort and support as it relates to your emotional relationship, your perception of the task that you have that's driving you into anxiety and avoidance? Maybe it's a combination of the two. But this is for my girlies who get a little overwhelmed. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It is not because you are incapable. The people that are seemingly doing that same thing, they're not doing it with a lack of support. They're not doing it all by themselves. They have the emotional support. They have the resources to be able to help them do those things. And they are not assuming the reason that things are going wrong is because there's something wrong with them. That is how they're able to do the things that you're watching them do. So you thinking that I should be able to do it too, not realistic, not true, is not helping you. So let's put that down. You're doing great. You have everything you need. You are so capable. And as like a fellow human on this earth, we can't know things we don't know. We can't experience things we haven't learned. And we are subject to the laws of the human condition, which is that we need connection and support as we're moving through stressors, which is both growth and difficult things. So add that in, file that away into the way that you're thinking about the world and what you're expecting from yourself. And hopefully that opens you up to a little bit more ease. That helps you take some things off your shoulders that you're putting on your shoulders, or at the very least opens up your mind and your heart to the thought of allowing people to come in and support and help you, because you deserve it. I love you all. I'll see you next week for more breakthroughs. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Breakthroughs with Bree. But before you go, please take a moment to either rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to it, or share this episode or maybe one of your other favorites with friends or loved ones that you think might enjoy or benefit from this content. Both of those things help more than you know, so that I can keep creating these episodes to help us all have more breakthroughs. Remember, you can connect with me on social media, sign up for my email list, hear what products, services, or events that I'm currently offering, all in the link in the show description, or by visiting my website, healingwithbree.net. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support and for the time that you're taking to heal yourself and align more with your beautiful soul, as it helps us all so much more than you realize. I'll see you all next week for more breakthroughs.